Welcome to Success Nation. I'm your host, Gary Ernest. Today I'm going to talk to you about power. If you had the ultimate power, what would you do with it? If you had the ultimate power, what would you do with it? I'm going to ask you several questions. And I'm going to elaborate on all those questions, give you different scenarios where you should use your power, and would you be able to use your power during those circumstances. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Success Nation. I'm your host, Gary Ernest. Today I'm going to talk to you about power. And that's the subject of today's topic. That's the subject. If you had the ultimate power, what would you do with it? If you had the choice to save a life, you had that choice. But you know, making that decision would be selfish. Would you make that decision to save that life? What if that life is your mother, your children, your wife, your husband, your best friend? Would you make that decision to use the power that was given to you? Sometimes we say to ourselves, if I had this power, if I had this talent, I would have done this. If I had the talent, if I had the power to do certain things, I would have done this. And sometimes until you are faced with that situation, you don't know what it means. You won't know what it means to make that decision. Sometimes that decision could be a very critical decision in your life. I mean, very critical. Decision that could choke you, decision that can let you breathe. But it's a very critical decision that you will have to make. If you have a child that is suffering from an ailment, and I know that's your child, but you have two choices to make. To let the child suffer being bedridden, or you let them go, where you may assume that they will be at peace. You can have that one best friend of yours you grew up with. There's a situation where they are suffering. Would you choose to let them suffer at the expense of your love you have for that person? Because you want that person to suffer to be with you. Would you make that decision when that moment comes? Would you be able to make that decision when that reality faces you in the face? That's the question. Or even if it's you, if you are bedridden and pain, suffering, would you allow your children to make that call? Would you allow your children to let you go in peace? But they won't see you anymore. They would not see you again. They would never see you. Would you give them the right and the permission to do that? Would you rather suffer in silence, but you are with your children, you are with your loved ones? Would you rather suffer? Or would you make a call? Would you make that decision to say, I'm going to leave. I'm going to meet my maker because right now I'm in pain. And if that person is your mother, is your father right now, let's say that person is your father. Let's say you have your father right now who's laying in the hospital bed, suffering. What would you do? Would you make that decision? I know most of us out there, we love our mothers. What if that person is your mother? If you have that power to make that decision, to let that person suffer, would you keep that person around, or would you let them go? Sometimes we don't realize that in our hearts we are keeping our loved ones in pain. Because we cannot do for ourselves. They feel so sorry for us, they want to stay around because they don't want to hurt us. They don't want to hurt us, they don't want to see us in pain. Therefore, like, you know what? Even though I'm suffering, but at least I'm here. I'm not going to leave any headaches for my children. I'm not going to leave any headaches for my loved ones. We say that to ourselves. We hear that all the time. But if you were to face with that situation, what would you do? What would be your reality for real? That's the question I'm asking you out there. That is the question I'm asking you. Because sometimes we say what we would do. Sometimes we speculate on what we would do if that were us. If that was us, this is what we would have done. Until you are faced with that reality, my friend, you don't know. Because sometimes that reality is not as easy as you may think. But you know what? That reality is sometimes what people are facing out there today. That is why a lot of people around the world are facing right now. To let their loved ones go while they are in pain, while they are suffering, while they have moments in their lives that they would not see that person ever again. You know, sometimes we say those things. We sit back and say to ourselves, we look at people and say, if I was a doctor and my mom was in the hospital, this is what I would have done. I would have done this. We say those things all the time. We say those things all the time. That's what we say to ourselves. We said, if that was my son, if that was my daughter, if I was my children, if I was my friend, this is what I would have done. We say those things to ourselves. But are we really telling us the truth? Are we really telling us the truth? Or are we just going by emotion, by attachment? By the physical attachment, due to the love of the physical world, we will allow people to suffer. Due to the love of us seeing that person around us all the time, we would not care if that person is suffering or not. But truth is, if that's the case, will we be selfish to want that person to be around? Or will we not be selfish? Is it selfish to want to see your loved one stay with you regardless of the suffering or not? Is it selfish? Is it selfish for you to do that? And sometimes we have to muster enough courage to say, you know what, I'm going to have to let you go. But until you're faced with that situation, until you're faced with that reality, my friend, I'm going to tell you this. You don't know what it is until that reality is staring you in the face and you have to make that decision. Sometimes we call it God, we call it demon, we call it angels, we call it whatever names we want to call it. But the truth is, regardless of all those names we call those situations, they are real. Regardless of what names we call those situations, they are real. They are not a figment of our imagination. They are not illusions. I have heard people say all kinds of things. You know what? The food that you are eating is not real. The car you are driving is not real. Well, I'm sitting on it. I'm sitting in it. I'm touching it. If I'm touching it, that is reality to me. Because your reality is not mine. Because that's the truth. Your reality, my friend, right now. I know right now you're suffering. you have your friends, you have your mother, you have your father. You have to make that decision. But when you look at them, if you were to let them go, would you be selfish or would you be a lover? Would it be selfish of you to say, you know what, Mom, Dad, I see you've been suffering, but I'm going to have to let you go. Or you say to yourself, you said to your son, you said to your daughter, you know what, I know you're in pain, but I would have to let you go. Would you have the courage to let that reality go? Would you have the courage to let that person go? There are mothers right now facing those reality right now. There are mothers and fathers facing the same reality right now. There are sons and daughters facing the same reality right now. You can call them selfish for keeping that person around, but you can also call them selfish for letting that person go. But either way, are they doing the wrong thing? Are you doing the wrong thing by either let go or keep that person around? By letting go or keeping that person around, are you doing the wrong thing? Are you doing the wrong thing? Because sometimes it's very critical when you're faced with that reality. It's a critical moment. Because that reality, regardless of what your level of education, regardless of your abilities, regardless of your non-abilities, you will realize that there will be a day where you will have to make a critical decision in your life. It might be the most important decision you will have to make in your life. And it may not be, but it might be the most important decision you're going to have to make in your life. But once you make that decision, once you're faced with that reality becomes real for you. That reality becomes real for you. Because until then, you're living in speculation. There are organizations, there are people out there that say, you know what? Death is just a joke. It is, but it's not. It is, but it's not. Because sometimes we do not know for real. Sometimes we live it. All we see is that's what we see. That's all we know. When that's all you know, when you detach yourself from it, it could be very painful. We'll be right back. This is Success Nation. I'm your host, Gary Ernest. Remember, share the message. Share the message with your friends, your family, your co-workers. Share the message. We'll be right back.